This is what an average high press looked like just 4 years ago. The pressing team had a man disadvantage in the centre, but would rotate to cover passing lanes and block central progression. Now compare that to what we see in 2025. The press is far more aggressive, and the entire team is locked into a man-marking system. But this isn't just a one-off example, and across the Premier League and Europe, we're seeing countless teams use this exact setup. But just a few years ago, this would have been seen as far too risky, leaving the defense too exposed to quick transitions. So what changed? Why has this suddenly become the best way to press? And what does it tell us about how football is evolving? Let's take a look. Welcome back to Football Meta. Recently on this channel, we made a video about playing out from the back, and how it might not be the one-size-fits-all approach we were all led to believe. And one of the main reasons we outlined was that teams are pressing more aggressively from goal kicks and from further up the pitch, shifting the balance between risk and reward further and further in the wrong direction. So naturally, the next question to ask is, why has this shift in defensive mentality taken place, with the vast majority of teams across Europe coming to the conclusion that this is the best approach despite its clear risks? In fact, just a few years ago, the press looked completely different. It was around the start of the decade that playing out from the back went from something the best teams in Europe were doing to something all teams would look to use, and it quickly became an increasingly important part of the game. This was mostly down to the fact that having the goalkeeper be involved in the attacking move would naturally give you a man advantage, leading to this initial phase being a 10v11. Unless, the goalkeeper decides to join the press, but managers don't unlock that until 2027. Defensively speaking, this extra player posed a substantial threat. If you close down the keeper, it frees up a player in a more advanced position, and quick passing combinations around the back started to find ways of exploiting aggressive defenses more and more frequently. So initially, the solution seemed to be to simply allow the opposition to have this advantage. Don't commit too many players forward, and even if they do break out, you still have enough players back to defend. In fact, while you may be outnumbered initially, you could still easily keep a 4v3 on the defensive line and make sure there is no easy pass into the striker. Take for example this clip from Arsenal v Man City 3 seasons ago. Arsenal rushed to close down the Man City centre-backs, but leave the player in the centre completely free to receive the ball. This is a pattern you basically never see in the modern game. It's either the whole team is aggressive, or the front two realise they are outnumbered, so will step back to form their mid-block shape. And now with this simple pass into the centre, Man City have found an advantage and have space to push forward. Even though they don't have a numerical advantage on the defensive line, this is still a tricky position for Arsenal to defend. Even in this 2-2 draw between Man City and Liverpool in the 21-22 season, you can clearly see how both teams are actively pressing with a 2-man disadvantage. The goalkeeper, and usually one holding midfielder. Now this doesn't mean the team doesn't press this player at all, but both Man City and Liverpool would look to close him down indirectly and close off passing routes. But with enough patience, this becomes tricky to continuously do. With this man disadvantage, the main objective was to lure the keeper into playing the ball into certain positions, usually on the flank where it was easier to get trapped. But regardless of what trap or system a team looked to use, the answer for the team in possession was pretty straightforward. With the right passes and the right players, building up from the back will nearly always result in a free player. And this is why build-up became such a fundamental tool for teams to master, as even though you might be moving the ball around the back for extended periods of time, the right pass at the right moment and you could easily cut out up to 6 players. But eventually, defensive teams started to catch on to what was going on. As more teams relied on build-up, defenders and goalkeepers became far more comfortable under pressure and would learn the exact ways to exploit the extra outfield player. And that's where man-oriented pressing started to become the solution. It wasn't just about intensity, it was about removing the free man entirely. If you could match every player and force the goalkeeper into uncomfortable areas, you could take away their advantage and tilt the risk in your favour. The core driving force of why a man-oriented system can work so well against build-up is because you're not allowing a player to receive on the turn. Even if they do break past the first line of the press, when the player receives the ball, he will be instantly closed down and will have to find another player to lay the ball off in order to progress. Just a few years ago, once the team found the free player, he could receive on the turn and push forward, which is a much harder situation to defend against. To match up man for man, it does require the defensive team to make a choice. Let's say, for example, both teams line up in a 4-2-3-1, by far the most common formation in the modern game. The two centre-backs would be picked up by the striker and the attacking midfielder, the wingers would stay on the fullbacks, and the holding midfielders would match up in the centre. In this case, the only real choice a team has to make in this position is how to close down the attacking midfielder, which is now almost always closed down by one of the centre-backs breaking the defensive line. The idea of breaking the defensive line is certainly nothing new, but the aggressive use during build-up is far more common today than it was just a few years ago. But there's still the main issue of the initial 3v2 from the goalkeeper, because the instant you close the keeper down, the outfield player does have space to push forward. But managers seem to be coming to the conclusion that this advantage is not actually that big for the team in possession, because as the keeper is closed down, the striker on the side from where he received the pass will slowly curve his run to ensure there is no easy pass back to the centre-back in this position. But because the options in the centre now have much less time on the ball, along with the other striker ensuring the pass through the middle is not easy to pull off, the third man pass that was so dangerous just a few years ago is now suddenly not as effective. And this is where the risk-reward mentality of man marking against opponent build-up comes back into play. Say a team is successful at building out from the back and moves into midfield. Well, the reward isn't always that great, because you still don't have a man advantage because all the players ahead of you are correctly followed. And you're still pretty far from the opponent's goal, giving the defending team time to get back. And the risk if you lose possession in this area is extremely high and can frequently lead to a goal-scoring opportunity. Now, there are also some tactical elements that we need to consider when talking about man-marking systems, because this doesn't mean that all the defensive players will instantly latch on to their direct opponents and follow them across the pitch, and they will give them certain space to lure the pass into specific areas. For example, let's say the left winger has to press the right back. In this case, he wouldn't instantly close down the right back before he's received the ball, as this would open up a very dangerous central channel for the centre back to play the ball forward. Rather, the winger will stay in his position and force the pass out wide into the right back before closing him down. Simultaneously, the right winger might move into a more central position to ensure they don't get outnumbered in midfield. So even though each player has a direct opponent, there are still a lot of moments in which they will move away from this player. And if the opponent is successful during build-up, the vast majority of teams will then switch to a zonal marking principle, for example shifting to a 4-4-2 defensive shape. There are very few teams that adopt man marking across the whole pitch. One of the best examples is Atalanta under Giampiero Gasperini. This season in the Premier League, one of the best examples of this man marking system can be seen with Newcastle under Eddie Howe. The high press is a crucial part of their tactics and have been able to dominate games with a relentless press even whilst having relatively low possession. Their press is structured in a way to force play out wide. The striker will curve his run and all the players in the centre are covered, giving the opposing team's goalkeeper few options. Either move the ball out wide and go down line, or go long directly into the forwards, which are again closely guarded by the defenders. This style is reflected in their high regains from this season. Whilst there are a few high up the pitch, the vast majority of them are coming out wide or behind the midfield line, as the opposition is playing long balls into the defence. From this position, they've had countless goal-scoring opportunities and have scored 11 goals, with an average of 0.32 goals per game from high regains. At times, they can get caught out with these long balls, but the main issue for Newcastle in this system is again how they potentially deal with a pass to the free centre-back when the keeper is closed down. And this has led to the opposition then having space to push forward. But because the remaining players further ahead are still closely followed, the options for the player on the ball are still pretty limited. One team that has an excellent way of countering this is Inter in the Serie A. From goal kicks, they also adopt a man-oriented system, but it's a lot more dynamic compared to teams like Newcastle, and there are more changes in marking taking place. For example, in this clip, once the keeper is closed down, the striker wouldn't have time to move over to the free player. So the midfielder continues his run forward, giving the striker time to cover the player in the centre and return to a man-marking system, but also having forced the opponent out wide. Now, whilst this man-oriented press is certainly becoming the most common approach, this doesn't mean that all successful teams are using this defensive style. Take, for example, Man City under Pep Guardiola. Whilst they still aim to win the ball back high up the pitch, their default isn't this relentless man-marking system we see from teams like Newcastle. and will often press with a man disadvantage and keep a numerical advantage in midfield. Another great example of this mentality is Bournemouth under Iraola, who rank as some of the best pressers in the league, and they often do so while keeping a man disadvantage in the centre. But the instant the ball is played into certain positions, the whole team is aggressive at pushing forward. So this free player is actually a trap the opposition will often fall for. So whilst this aggressive press is the dominant trend, different and equally as effective defensive philosophies still exist at the highest level. So what does all of this tell us about the way modern football is going? The rise of this aggressive man-oriented press, while extremely effective at stopping opponent build-up, is also leading to a fascinating counter-trend: the increase in long balls. With every outfield player marked tightly and the goalkeeper being the only free player, teams are increasingly willing to bypass the midfield battle entirely. And this shift is arguably making games more chaotic, and for many viewers, more entertaining. Because these intricate tactical battles crafted by managers are suddenly being bypassed by a direct ball into space. And suddenly the game becomes less about perfectly crafted moves and more about individual battles and 1v1s all across the pitch. Whether this is a long-term evolution or a temporary cycle remains to be seen. But for now, the relentless press is undeniably contributing to a more direct, transitional, and arguably more thrilling brand of football. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you to everyone who's become a channel member here on YouTube and on Patreon, and we've now crossed 115 members, which is unbelievable, and I can't thank you enough. As an added incentive to join the Football Meta community, when we hit 200 members, I'll make an extra video detailing how I edit my videos and how you can do the same to use for your own tactical analysis. I'll show you how you can create these graphics for free without needing to rely on specific tactics software, which can be quite expensive. So if you're interested, you can get started with the join button down below. Thanks for watching.